The hum of the suburban mall on a Saturday afternoon was the kind of background noise that wrapped itself around conversations and footsteps like an invisible blanket. Families wander between stores, children tug on their parents' hands, and somewhere, the faint echo of pop music bounced off glass walls. Near the food court, Officer Daniel stood with his thumbs tucked into his belt, a half-smirk playing on his face. In front of him, a teenage girl, no older than 15, shifted awkwardly, eyes cast down. Her name was Ava Carter, and her jeans and plain gray t-shirt made her look like any other kid her age. But her expression, that quiet mix of embarrassment and frustration, set her... All right,
let's see
Officer
here.
Daniel said,
Security
glancing down at the
incident
small
at the jewelry
security
kiosk.
report in his hand.
That's you, right?
So, you were caught
you're the one
arguing
who
with a
stopped
store
him.
clerk, knocking
This
over a
report
display,
states you were the
and
only one
refusing to
who knew this
leave.
happened.
That
Care to
about right.
explain that, sweetie?
Ava's
It
shoulders
wasn't me.
slumped. It
I
wasn't
told
like
him to
that.
stop, but
She
he
was
just
rude
knocked
first.
everything over.
Uh-huh. He scribbled something on his notepad,
My mother is
clearly
on her
unimpressed. And you're telling me your mom's on her way? Yeah, she muttered. She's coming.
You really
Daniels
thought you could just
chuckled.
walk away
You kids
from
always
that,
say that
didn't
like
you,
it's a
kid?
threat. He
You're
leaned
way
closer,
over your head.
lowering his voice with mock seriousness. What's she gonna do? Ground you? Ava didn't answer.
Look, I don't know
She
what
kept her
you were
eyes on the
trying to
floor.
prove, but
He
this
sighed,
behavior
shaking
won't
his
be
head.
tolerated.
Look, you seem like a good
If I
kid.
see you
Just
here
cool it
again,
next time,
there
okay?
will be
Don't make me have
consequences.
to. She's in the military.
She's in the military.
Ava blurted, cutting him off.
Force.
Special Forces. Daniels froze mid-sentence, then let out a loud, hearty laugh that drew the attention of two passing shoppers. Special Forces? Really? He crossed his arms, amusement dancing in his eyes. Let me guess, Green Beret? Secret agent? Maybe even a ninja.
Delta
Ava frowned,
Force.
stung by his tone. Delta Force, she said quietly, almost to herself. Daniels couldn't help but laugh again. Delta Force, huh? Kid, you watch too many movies. That's not exactly something you just say. Delta Force doesn't have soccer moms picking up their kids from the mall. But Ava said nothing. She just folded her arms and waited, her jaw tightening. Daniel shook his head, still chuckling. Well, I'll believe it when I see it. Minutes ticked by. The mall crowd ebbed and flowed. Then the air changed. A subtle shift, like the quiet before a storm. Heads turned near the main entrance as a figure strode in with a kind of purpose that demanded attention. She wore full tactical gear,
Is that a soldier?
desert camouflage fatigues, boots that echo with authority, and a cap with a subdued flag
Delta
patch.
Force.
Her name badge read Carter. The vest across her chest bore two simple words, Delta Force. Daniel's grin faltered. Ava looked up, relief flickering in her eyes. The woman's gaze was sharp, scanning the area until it locked on her daughter. She moved like a panther, fluid, precise, no wasted motion. Even the mall security guard stepped aside instinctively as she approached. Daniel straightened his posture, clearing his throat. Ma'am? The woman stopped in
I'm
front
Sergeant
of him,
Major
her
Carter.
tone calm but commanding.
You have a problem with my
I'm
daughter?
Sergeant Major Carter. You have a problem with my daughter? For a moment, the mall seemed to hold its breath. The laughter died in Daniel's throat. His earlier arrogance shriveled into something closer to awe. Ava stood quietly beside her mother, eyes wide, as the officer scrambled to explain himself. No, ma'am. No problem at all. Just a
Then I
misunderstanding.
suggest you end it.
Sergeant Carter
Let's
didn't
go.
blink. Then I suggest you end it. Daniels nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. She turned to Ava. Let's go. As they walked away, Daniels watched them, the soldier, her daughter, moving through the crowd like something out of a different world. And for the first time that day, he realized the girl hadn't been exaggerating. She had told the truth. And then some. The silence in the car was the kind that carried weight, not from anger, but from things left unsaid. The hum of the engine filled the space between mother and daughter as the city lights slid across the windshield, flickering against their faces like fragments of... Sergeant Major Carter kept her eyes on the road, her posture straight, her jaw set in that familiar, unshakable calm that Ava both admired and resented. Ava sat in the passenger seat, arms folded, watching her reflection in the window blur with every passing streetlight. She could still feel the heat of embarrassment from the mall,
That is
not just in the
enough.
crowd that stared or from Officer Daniel's laughter, But from away her mom had appeared like a storm, controlled yet powerful, and shut it all down in seconds. "You could have called me earlier," her mother said finally, her voice even but edged with that command tone that came naturally to her. "I didn't think I needed to," Ava replied softly. "You were being questioned by mall security and a cop. Ava, that's not something you handle on your own." Ava sighed. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just stood up for myself. The clerk was being rude. And you knocked over a display rack. Carter, cut in. That's not standing up for yourself. That's losing control." Ava turned to look at her, frustration flashing in her eyes. "You always talk about control, about discipline, about rules. Do you ever stop being a soldier?" The words hung there, sharp, heavier than either of them expected. Carter's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Discipline keeps people alive, Ava. I'm not in combat, Mom. I'm in high school." The car rolled to a stop at a red light. Outside, a group of kids crossed the street, laughing, free, careless, untouched by the kind of life Ava lived. Her mother's eyes softened, if only for a second. "I know you think I'm hard on you," Carter said quietly, "but the world doesn't go easy on anyone, especially not on young women who don't know when to hold their ground and when to walk away." Ava looked down at her hands. "You're never here to even see me try." That landed like a punch. Carter didn't respond. The light turned green, and the car moved again. The truth of Ava's words lingered in the air, a reminder of every missed birthday, every empty chair to school play, every phone call cut short by static and orders. Back at home, their house was tidy, minimal, and organized with military precision, just like her. Ava trudged upstairs, while her mother paused in the entryway, removing her tactical vest and setting it carefully on the counter. She looked around the living room. The photos on the wall, the medals framed beside a picture of a man in uniform, her late husband, Ava's father. A faint ache crept into her chest. He had been the easy one, the bridge between her duty and her daughter's world. Since his passing, Carter had doubled down on discipline. Not because she didn't love Ava, but because she was terrified of losing control, of losing her. Upstairs, Ava sat on her bed, scrolling through her phone, trying to ignore the lump in her throat. She replayed the moment from the mall, the way her mom had walked in, unshaken, commanding. For a brief moment, she had felt proud. Proud that her mom was someone people respected, even feared. But that pride twisted into something complicated. How could someone so strong seem so distant? Downstairs, Carter finally exhaled, letting the facade of the unbreakable soldier slip away for just a moment. She rubbed her temples, whispering to herself, "I'm doing my best, Marcus," as if her late husband could still hear her. That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She heard her mother's boots against the hardwood floor, the quiet rhythm of someone pacing. Thinking, worrying, preparing. For what, Ava didn't know. But for the first time, she wondered if her mom's silence wasn't coldness. Maybe it was the sound of someone who'd been fighting for far too long. The mall incident had shaken something loose between them. Not enough to fix it. Not yet. But enough to start. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, striping the walls of Sergeant Major Carter's modest kitchen in shades of gold and gray. The coffee pot gurgled softly, the scent of freshly brewed caffeine mixing with a faint smell of gun oil from the open duffel on the counter. Every piece of her gear was arranged with meticulous precision. Folded fatigues, field gloves, tactical headset, and a sidearm locked in its case. This was her ritual, her way of controlling the chaos before stepping into a world that thrived on it. On the refrigerator, a magnet held one of Ava's old drawings, a stick figure family, smiling beneath a crooked rainbow. The edges had curled with time, but Carter never took it down. It was a reminder of everything she fought for and everything she feared losing. By 0600, she was at Fort Redwood, a secure operations base hidden behind layers of concrete, barbed wire, and silence. The shift from civilian to soldier happened in an instant. At home, she was mom, stern, tired, trying to keep things together. Here, she was Carter, one of Delta's most respected operators, known for her precision under pressure and unflinching command presence. "Morning, Major," said Captain Reeves, her second in command, as she entered the tactical room. "Morning," she replied, setting her files down. Reeves grinned. "Heard you had a run-in with local law enforcement yesterday. Something about your daughter scaring a mall cop?" Carter raised an eyebrow but didn't smile. Word travels fast. Small town. Big news. Besides, can't blame the guy. I'd probably freeze up too if he walked in wearing your gear. She shook her head. "It's not funny, Reeves. Ava's a good kid. She doesn't understand why I'm gone so much." Reeves softened. "She's a teenager. They rarely do. But one day she'll get it." Carter didn't answer. She stared at the mission map projected on the wall. Coordinates, routes, satellite images. The controlled chaos of her professional life. Every red marker represented a mission, a moment when she had to make impossible decisions, often in the dark. Later, during a training exercise, she led her unit through a simulated urban assault. Her voice was steady over comms. "Left flank clear. Stack on me. Breach on my mark." The soldiers moved like a machine, trusting her commands without question. When the mock room was cleared, Reeves called out, "Objective secure. Textbook execution, Major." She removed her helmet, sweat glistening on her forehead, but her expression remained calm. "That's how we keep people alive," she said quietly. Hours later, she sat in her office, a photo of Ava on the desk beside classified files. She picked it up, Ava at age 8, grinning with missing front teeth and a medal from her first track meet around her neck. It had been one of the few weekends Carter had made it home in time. For a moment, the ironclad mask of command slipped. She whispered, "You deserve more than this, baby girl." Meanwhile, across town, Ava sat in her classroom, staring out the window. The teacher's voice blurred into background noise. Her friends whispered about sleepovers, TikTok trends, and weekend plans. But Ava couldn't stop thinking about yesterday, about the way her mom had walked into that mall like she owned the ground she stood on. Her best friend, Lila, nudged her. "Hey, what's up with you? You've been zoned out all morning." Ava blinked. "Just thinking about my mom." "The scary soldier mom?" Lila teased, laughing. "Girl, I saw that video online. She looked like she came straight out of an action movie." Ava frowned. "What video?" Lila turned her phone around, a grainy clip from the mall security footage that had leaked onto social media. The caption read, "Cop laughs at teen until her mom shows up." It had thousands of views, hundreds of comments, and hashtags like #DeltaMom and #MallMission. Ava felt her face burn. At first, she was embarrassed. Everyone was talking about her. But as she scrolled through the comments, something unexpected happened. That mom's a legend. Discipline, strength, respect. That kid must be so proud. Pride. The word echoed in Ava's mind. For the first time, she saw her mother through other people's eyes, not just as a strict, unreachable soldier who missed dinners, but as a hero. That night, when Carter came home late, Ava was still awake, waiting at the kitchen table. "Hey," Ava said quietly. Carter looked surprised. "Shouldn't you be asleep?" "I saw the video." Ava said, "People think you're amazing." Carter smiled faintly. "People only see the uniform, not what it costs." Ava tilted her head. "Then maybe you should tell me." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two worlds finally starting to meet. For the first time in years, Carter didn't brush her daughter off when she asked about her work. The night stretched long, and the kitchen light cast soft amber on the table between them. Outside, rain pattered gently against the window, the world muted and still. It was a kind of night when secrets felt lighter, when walls could finally crack. Carter set down her coffee mug and leaned back, eyes distant. "You remember when I told you your dad and I met in training?" she began. Ava nodded. "Yeah, you said you were both soldiers." "Not just soldiers," Carter said softly. "We were part of a rapid deployment unit. The kind that goes in before anyone else knows there's a problem. We trained for months in places no one talks about, jungles, deserts, cities that don't exist on any map. He was the calm one. I was the stubborn one. Together, we were good." Her voice faltered for the first time. Ava leaned forward, heart beating faster. She had never heard her mother speak like this. Not the command voice, but the human one. What happened to him? Ava asked quietly. Carter took a slow breath. He died on a mission overseas. It wasn't supposed to go bad, but they always say that. Afterward, I stayed in. Maybe I thought if I kept fighting, I could make sense of losing him. She looked at her daughter, eyes glistening. But I think all I really did was run from the pain. Ava's throat tightened. You didn't have to run from me. That line hit Carter, like a bullet she hadn't seen coming. She looked down, her fingers curling around the mug, as if to steady herself. You're right, she said finally. But sometimes being a soldier feels easier than being a mom. Out there, I know what to do. Here, I'm always afraid I'll mess up. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Ava reached out, hesitant but certain, and placed her hand over her mother's. Carter froze for a second, then returned the gesture, squeezing gently. It was a small act, but monumental. Before either of them could say more, Carter's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, and her face shifted instantly from mother to soldier. The alert was marked priority red. Work, Ava asked. Carter stood, already grabbing her gear. There's been an incident downtown, a stolen military transport. Could be connected to an arms ring we've been tracking. I have to go. Ava frowned. Now! It's the middle of the night. Duty doesn't wait for daylight, Carter said, checking her sidearm. Then she paused, noticing the worry in her daughter's eyes. Lock the doors. Stay here. But Ava's instincts and her heart screamed otherwise. Within minutes, flashing lights painted the city streets in shades of red and blue. Carter's black SUV pulled up behind a convoy of local police vehicles near a warehouse district. Rain slicked the pavement, reflecting every siren like shards of broken glass. Suspects are armed, a SWAT sergeant briefed her, possibly ex-military. Took off with classified hardware. We got hostages inside. Carter nodded sharply. Then we moved fast. As she led her unit toward the entrance, movement from the shadows made her freeze. A small figure was slipping out of the back seat of a nearby car. Ava, she hissed. Her daughter froze mid-step, soaked from the rain but determined. You said you didn't want to run from things. I'm not running now. For a heartbeat, the soldier in Carter wanted to yell, to order her back. But the mother, the part of her that finally understood her daughter's fire, hesitated. Ava wasn't being reckless. She was being her mother's daughter. Fine, Carter whispered. You stay low. Don't move unless I tell you. The tactical team breached the warehouse with a thunderous crack. Gunfire echoed, smoke filled the air, and shadows darted between crates. Ava crouched behind a barrier, heart pounding as she watched her mother move. Precise, fearless, unstoppable. Then one of the armed men broke from cover, heading straight toward Ava's hiding spot. Carter turned just in time to see it. Ava. The world exploded in noise, shouting, shots, movement. Carter sprinted, tackling the man before he reached her daughter. The impact rattled through the concrete floor as she subdued him with swift, practiced force. When the dust settled, the hostages were safe, the weapons recovered, and the criminals detained. Carter stood there, chest heaving, looking at her daughter, alive, wide-eyed, trembling, and realized this was the first mission she'd ever fought not for her country, but for her heart. The warehouse was finally quiet. The sirens had stopped. The smoke had thinned, and all that remained was the rhythmic patter of rain against the roof. The tension that filled every inch of that place was dissolving into relief, the kind that comes only after chaos. Carter stood with her hands braced on her knees, breathing hard, her hair sticking to her forehead. Around her, Delta operators secured the scene, local police gathered evidence, and a medic checked the rescued hostages for injuries. Ava sat on a crate nearby, shivering under a foil blanket someone had handed her. Her face was pale, eyes glassy, her mind replaying the past 20 minutes like a storm she couldn't turn off. The shouting, the gunfire, the moment her mother threw herself between her and danger. Carter finally walked over, crouching in front of her. You okay? Ava nodded, though her voice trembled. I think so. Carter's eyes softened. You shouldn't have been here. I know, Ava whispered, but I couldn't just sit at home not knowing. I thought maybe you'd need me. That last line stopped Carter cold. Her throat tightened in a way it hadn't on any battlefield. You were brave, she said quietly. Reckless, but brave. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, soaked, exhausted, but connected in a way they had never been before. One of the officers approached, awkward and apologetic. It was Officer Daniels, the same man from the mall. His face was pale, eyes wide as he took in scene, and the woman standing before him in full combat gear, dripping rain and command presence. Sergeant Major Carter, he stammered. I didn't realize who you were before. Carter straightened slowly, looking him dead in the eye. Doesn't matter who I am, officer. What matters is you treat people with respect, even when you don't understand them. Daniels swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Ava almost smiled. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. And seeing her mother handle it with calm authority made her feel something she hadn't in a long time. Pride without resentment. Back at home, the morning light crept in as they walked through the door. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the quiet exhaustion that comes after survival. Carter hung up her vest, unstrapped her boots, and sank onto the couch. Ava followed, curling up beside her, still processing everything she'd seen. So that's what you do? Ava finally asked, her voice soft but steady. Every time you leave? Carter nodded. Sometimes worse. Sometimes simpler. But it's always dangerous. That's why I don't talk about it. Not because I don't trust you, but because I need you safe from it. Ava leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. You saved lives tonight. Carter gave a tired smile. That's the job. No, Ava said quietly. You saved me. The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was full of understanding, a rare peace between two people who had spent years on opposite sides of the same war. A few hours later, a convoy from the base arrived to debrief Carter and retrieve evidence from the operation. Reeves stepped into the living room, grinning when he saw Ava curled up with her mom. Didn't think I'd ever see you sitting still, Major, he teased. Carter smirked. Don't get used to it. Reeves nodded at Ava. Heard you held your ground last night. Takes guts. Ava blushed. Guess it runs in the family. When they left, Carter turned to her daughter. You should rest. I will, Ava said, standing. But, Mom, can we maybe start spending more time together? Not missions or training, just us? Carter hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I think I'd like that. That night, as Carter stood by Ava's bedroom door, watching her drift into sleep, she felt a strange peace she hadn't known in years. Not the kind that comes from completing a mission, the kind that comes from coming home. She looked at the medals hanging on her shelf, the folded flag in its wooden frame, the photo of Marcus. She's brave, Marcus, she whispered. Braver than both of us. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear again, the first quiet dawn after a long storm. And somewhere inside her, the soldier finally rested, if only for a while. Weeks had passed since the warehouse night, yet the echoes of that storm lingered, not as fear, but as change. Life had resumed its rhythm. The hum of morning routines, the scent of coffee, the rush to school, and the long drives home. But something was different in the Carter household now. The silence that once felt like a wall had turned into a bridge. Sergeant Major Carter was still the same woman who woke before dawn and ironed her uniforms with surgical precision, but she started doing small, surprising things, cooking breakfast on Sundays, asking about Ava's classes, leaving handwritten notes that read things like, proud of you today, or you did good. They were little gestures, awkward at first, but real. And Ava? She was changing too. At school, whispers still followed her. The video from the mall hadn't gone away. But instead of embarrassment, Ava carried herself with quiet confidence. When people joked or stared, she didn't shrink anymore. She didn't have to. She had looked fear in the face, real fear, and realized she could stand her ground. Her teachers noticed. Her friends noticed. Even Lila, her best friend, started saying, You've got that don't mess with me vibe now. Ava laughed it off, but deep down, she understood where it came from. It wasn't about acting tough. It was about knowing strength didn't always mean shouting louder. Sometimes it meant simply standing taller. One Friday afternoon, the school announced a community event, a Veterans Appreciation Day, honoring families who had served. Ava hesitated when the flyer came around. She'd never once convinced her mom to attend anything like that before. Carter avoided public attention, preferring the shadows where soldiers like her belonged. That night at dinner, Ava brought it up. "They're doing this thing at school for veterans next week," she said, trying to sound casual. "You could come if you want." Carter looked up from her plate, brows slightly furrowed. "You want me there?" Ava nodded. "Yeah, I think people should know what you've done. What you are." Carter smiled faintly, though her eyes softened with something almost vulnerable. "You sure?" "I'm not exactly PDA material." Ava grinned. "Maybe not, but you're still my mom." When the day came, the auditorium was packed. Rows of folding chairs faced a small stage draped with flags, and families filled the room. Dads in old uniforms, moms in dresses, kids holding handmade signs. Carter stood near the back at first, uncomfortable in her pressed blues, her medals catching the light. Ava found her and tugged her hand. "Come on, you're supposed to sit up front." Carter hesitated but followed, each step feeling heavier than any battlefield she'd ever walked. The principal gave a speech about courage, sacrifice, and the unseen strength of military families. Then, without warning, the microphone was handed to Ava. "Would you like to say something about your parents' service?" the principal asked. Ava froze. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. But then she saw her mother in the front row, calm, proud, giving her a nod that said, "You've got this." So she stepped forward. "My mom," she began, her voice shaky at first, "is in the Special Forces. For a long time, I didn't really understand what that meant. I just knew she was gone a lot. Missed things. Missed me. I used to think she cared more about her job than about home." She paused, her eyes finding Carter's again. "But now I know that wasn't true. She wasn't just fighting for the country. She was fighting for me, for all of us." The room was silent except for the faint sniffles of people trying not to cry. Ava smiled, her voice steady now. "She taught me that being strong doesn't mean never being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are. And that's what she does every single day." When she stepped down, Carter stood. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just opened her arms, and Ava ran into them. The applause that filled the room wasn't just for the soldier. It was for the mother and daughter who had finally found each other again. Later that evening, back home, Carter looked at Ava and said, "You spoke like a leader today." Ava smiled. "Guess it runs in the family." Carter laughed, a sound so rare and genuine that Ava couldn't help laughing, too. And for the first time, their house didn't feel like a place between two worlds. It felt like home. The evening after the Veterans Day ceremony, the world felt strangely still. The applause, the kind words, the pride, all of it lingered in the corners of Carter's mind as she sat on the back porch, watching the last light of day melt into amber across the horizon. The hum of crickets replaced the city noise. Her uniform jacket hung over the chair beside her, metals glinting faintly in the dying sun. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of them pressing down. Ava joined her, barefoot, holding 2 mugs of cocoa instead of coffee. "You always drink the bitter stuff," she said with a grin, handing one over. Carter smirked. "Old habits. You trying to change me now?" "Maybe," Ava teased, "starting with your caffeine addiction." They sat side by side, the quiet between them comfortable now. No tension, no distance, just warmth, something they'd both forgotten how to feel. "I was proud of you today," Carter said softly. "What you said up there, you made me see myself differently. I've spent my whole life thinking strength was about never breaking. But you reminded me it's okay to be seen." Ava smiled, gazing out at the sunset. "You always talk about missions, about protecting people. But I think this was the hardest one you ever had, learning how to be here." Carter chuckled under her breath. "You might be right." Then her tone softened. "But you were my reason for finishing it. For a while, neither spoke. The world beyond their porch felt peaceful, but in the distance, thunder rumbled, a storm rolling in from the west. It was the kind of sound Carter would once have interpreted as warning. Now, it simply sounded alive. When the rain started, it came fast, not violent, just steady. Ava squealed as the first drops hit, darting toward the yard. "Come on," she called, spinning barefoot in the wet grass, her laughter rising with the rain. Carter shook her head, smiling. "You're going to catch a cold. Then you'll have to rescue me." Ava shouted, grinning wide. Carter stepped off the porch, her boots sinking into the mud, and for the first time in decades, she let herself forget about formality and rank. The rain plastered her hair to her face as she joined Ava in the yard, laughing. A deep, unrestrained sound that belonged to neither the soldier nor the officer, but simply to a mother who'd finally come home. When they finally retreated inside, soaked and breathless, Ava grabbed a towel and wrapped it around both of them. The house glowed with warm light. On the mantel, beside the folded flag and her father's picture, was a new photo. The two of them at the school ceremony, smiling, shoulders touching. Carter looked at it for a long moment. "You know," she said, "your father would have loved that picture. He always said we'd raise someone fearless." Ava smiled shyly. "You think he'd be proud?" "I know he would." Silence again, soft, meaningful, the kind that spoke louder than words ever could. Then the phone rang. Carter glanced at it, recognizing the secure line, the one she hadn't heard in weeks. A summons from command, a mission, the old pull of duty. She stood still for a moment, the hum of rain outside mirroring the pulse in her chest. Ava looked up at her. "You're leaving again?" Carter hesitated. "They need me." Ava swallowed hard but nodded. "Then go. Just promise me you'll come back." Carter reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her daughter's face. "I always do." Hours later, when the SUV disappeared down the dark road, Ava stood by the window, watching the taillights fade into the storm. But this time, she didn't feel abandoned. She felt proud and strong, because she finally understood. Her mom wasn't running from her. She was running for her. For everyone who needed someone brave enough to stand in the dark and hold the line. Weeks passed before Carter returned. The knock came early one morning. Ava opened the door to see her mother there, tired but alive, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Mission accomplished, Carter said simply. Ava threw her arms around her, holding on tight. "Welcome home, soldier." And in that embrace, in that quiet, rain-washed morning, the story that began with laughter and disbelief ended with something far stronger. Understanding, love, and the unspoken truth that heroes aren't just the ones who fight battles far away. Sometimes, they're the ones who find their way back home.